might easily know by his looks that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. All right? So this reference tells us that just by his looks, they could tell that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. This reference is lining up with the previous references of the
All right, my brothers, my sisters, the Talbot family. How you doing, brother and sister Talbot? I hope everything is going well with you all up in St. Mary's, Georgia. I hope everything is going great with Terry and Coach and all of you all that are coming into the chat room. Tonight is our special report, a global hidden secret. Tonight is a global hidden secret. This has been 4 weeks of these special reports. You're going to enjoy this one tonight. It's a two-part series. And then after that, we're going to have just a few songs. We're going to be coming. But this is great. This is going to be good information falling off of that lesson that we had today brought to by Pastor Boy, talking about the priests of God. I just sit there in all awe today, to know what our role is, and the fact that the illustration was given that even though we're in captivity, the examples in the scriptures that was given, how that although we are in captivity, we still have to pick up the oracles and still have to give them to people. So that's what we have to do. There's Asina from Brother Antonio from IOG Los Angeles is in the room. All of you all that are in the room, it's great to have you all here tonight. You're going to enjoy the special report from Brother Benaya Israel, is the producer of these tonight. He's a good brother, very good brother. We have done a few conferences together, and he has done a lot of extensive research on the people of the book. And of course, as we start to get down through our Black History Month, we have been doing these special reports for you every Saturday night. And of course, every Sabbath at 1 o'clock, we have been bringing some very good lessons. Next week is part 5. It's the final. And then we're going to be getting into a lot of other different things. We're getting into the feast days on this channel for Bible class. So make sure you tune in for that. You're going to enjoy this. You're going to enjoy this one tonight. I think that the information that is being brought forth will be beneficial. Again, there's a 2-part series, and enjoy both of them. I'll be in the chat room and be right here with you. That being said, I'm going to get out of the way, and here is Brother Benaya Israel.
Shalom, family. This is Benaya Ben Israel, bringing you a presentation on Black history. The name of this presentation is Black History, the Inquisition. That's Black History, the Inquisition. Now, you may be surprised to know, or you may be wondering, why would we associate the Inquisition with Black history? Well, believe it or not, the Inquisition has had a great impact on Black history. And so what I'm going to do in this presentation, we're going to try to keep it short and sweet. I'm only going to review 8 references. So in this presentation, is the wish is that you don't hear my words, but you hear the references of the authors that were around 100 or so years ago. So with these references, I don't like to use references that are from the 1900s or newer. So basically, whenever you open up a book and you see that that publication date in there, I like to use publication dates or books with publication dates of like the 1800s or older, because those books tend to have a lot of truth in them. So let's go ahead and get started. Don't want to delay too long. So what we'll do is we're going to do two things. Do a couple of things. One is we'll just read just a few references as to the color of the Jews, and then we'll get rolling into the other references. I do have some follow-up presentations on the color of the Jews. With I may put 20 or so references together just to kind of put the nail in the coffin as far as that conversation is concerned. But for this presentation, we're only going to do 3, and hopefully these are 3 references that you haven't seen before. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to exit out of that and just take you to one of the first references. So this reference comes from a book called The Negro in the New World by Sir Harry Johnston. And for some of these, I may not read out the reference there, but you will be able to see it on the screen. And if you want to see if you can find these references yourself, feel free to pause and write that information down, and then you can kind of proceed. So this one comes from, again, Negro in the New World. And we're going to go to page 27. And again, the point of this reference is just to establish the color of the Jews. So we're going to look at the color of the Jews. All right, my screen's a bit choppy here, so just bear with me. It takes a while for my screen to redraw because I have a lot of things running in the background. So we'll get there soon enough. All right, almost there, just a couple of pages away. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in because on this page in particular, we want to go to page 27, and then we want it to scroll all the way to the bottom, and we're going to read the footnote on this page. So I'm going to go into, let's see if I can zoom into 135%. And then I'm going to scroll over here. So hang on. All right, almost there. All right, I'm going to read this one twice just so that you understand what we're reading. All right, so this footnote, it's at the very bottom, and you can follow along while we read, but while I read, but it basically says the Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negroid strain shows itself occasionally in the curly hair, the long eye, and proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica, and I know I'm going to mess up this name, but we're going to look at it, Guana, reproduce most strikingly the Assyrian type. All right, let me read that again. The Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negroid strain shows itself occasionally in the curly hair, the long eye, and the proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Ghana reproduce most strikingly the Assyrian type. All right. So this kind of just gets us started in linking the Negroes, or the so-called African Americans, to being the Jews. So let's take another look at another reference. Now for this one, I'm going to go to my web browser, because some of these references I have digital copies, and some of them are hard copies. Some of the books are hard to get to. They're rare books. They cost upwards of I've seen some of these books at around $50,000. Actually, 58 was the highest I've seen them, or $11,000. So don't be surprised if you go out there and you try to find them and you see some just crazy prices associated with these references. And it has to do with they're just the powers to be just kind of want to keep some of these books out of mainstream. But actually that works in our advantage, because folks like me that like to do research, when we go to these websites for books on like things like Africa or Jews or stuff like that, basically what I do, just to kind of give you some insight, I will go to these websites, and then I'll perform the search, and then I'll sort the search by price, and I'll put the most expensive books at the top, and the cheapest ones at the bottom. And usually the ones that are the expensive books that show up at the top are the ones that aren't meant for mainstream. Like, those are the ones that have the big price tags that whoever, is out there, they don't want that to fall into the hands of people that are doing research. So, but again, that works in our advantage. All right, so for our next one, let's see here. Oh, okay, all right. So this one's called On the Classification and Geographical Distribution of Mammalia. All right, so I'm on page, for this one, we're going to page 96, but I will, let me go back to the front of the book so that you can see the actual cover of this book here. All right, so kind of zoomed in, but you can see the title there. So that's the title, and that's the author of this book. So I'm going to jump to page 96. And there's page 96. It's on the left. And let's look for our reference. All right, so now on this one, and then let me zoom in on this one as well. There we go. All right. Now, the reference that we're looking for in this one is the last paragraph on this page. And let's see here. I may just start midway here where it says 4. But yeah, well, I guess we can read the whole thing. It says, with reference to the characteristic of color, which are extreme, we have now opportunities of knowing how much that character is the result of the influence of climate. So back in the day, they used to think that climate would have decide whether or not you were black or white, but that's just the way it was. It says, we know it more particularly by the most valuable mode of testing such influences which we derive from the peculiarity of the Jewish race. It says, for 1,800 years, that race has been dispersed in different latitudes and climates, and they have preserved themselves distinct from intermixture with other races of mankind. It says, there are some Jews still lingering in the valleys of the Jordan, having been oppressed by and let me move over to the other page, top of the page here. Successive conquerors of Syria for ages, a low race of people, and described by trustworthy travelers as being as black as any of the Ethiopian races. Let me read that one again. And I'm just going to start up here where it says, a low race of people, and described by trustworthy travelers as being as black as any of the Ethiopian races. Just for context, I'm going to keep reading. It says, others of the Jewish people participating in European civilization and dwelling in the northern nations show instances. You know what an instance, if you're black but you have instances of white, those are considered exceptions. But let me start again here. It says, others of the Jewish people participating in European civilization and dwelling in the northern nations show instances of the light complexion, the blue eyes, and the light hair of the Scandinavian families. So I'm just going to stop there. It goes into, climate and stuff like that. But it does, well, actually, there's a little nugget of information here at the end where it says the condition of the Hebrews since their dispersion has not been such as to admit much admixture by the proselytism of household slaves. We are thus led to account for the differences in color by the influence of climate without having to refer them to original or specific distinctions. In other words, without having to say which ones are original and which ones are, are the add-ons, so to speak, or the proselytes. But I have a couple of references that should help clear that up too. So let's take a look. All right, so you got that one. That's our second reference. So for the third reference, this is also one that you can find on the web. Hopefully you can see it on the screen. It's the Christian Researches in Asia by Claudius Buchanan. And so should be able to see that on the left-hand screen. If not, let me see if I can zoom in here. Actually, so I'm on page, for this one, the references is on page 205, and I'm going to scroll up to the front page so that you can see the book. All right, so see the title. All right, so that's the title. I'm going to scroll down and see if you can get the author. All right, that's the author, the Reverend Claudius Buchanan. And again, let's look at that publication date. You see it? 1811. So this is a book that was around 1811. And the other two books were also written in the 1800s too. I forgot to show that. All right, so I'm going to go down to, let's see, so we're at page 205. Let me see if I can find my place again. Let's see, 164. Hang on, guys. 192. All right, getting close. And all right, there it is. All right, 205. All right. So what's so special about this this quote? Well, let's go to page 205, and then we'll scroll down to halfway down the page to Black Jews. Black Jews. All right, I'm going to read quite a bit of this. I think this is only a page here. I have some notes here off the side, but let's get started. If we have to stop, we can stop. All right, so Black Jews, it says, it is only necessary to look at the countenance of the Black Jews to be satisfied that their ancestors must have arrived in India many, many ages before the white Jews. I think I need to read that one again. All right. It is only necessary to look at the countenance of the Black Jews to be satisfied that their ancestors must have arrived in India many ages before the white Jews. Now, if you're familiar with history with John Hyrcanus and the conversion of the Edomites, that will help shed some light on the differences between the white Jews and the Black Jews, that sort of thing. Because during the forget the date. It's like 160 something BC. The Jews forcefully they converted the Edomites over to Jews, and from that point forward, according to Josephus, the Edomite Jews were also considered Jews. So that's why whenever you're researching these books, you'll see two classes of Jews. You'll see, white Jews, or sometimes they're called red Jews, and then you have Black Jews. So the Black Jews are considered the ancient Jews, and the red Jews are either the proselytes or the new Jews. So let's keep going. I'm gonna start back at the top here. I'll try to leave the commentary at a minimum, but just want you to know why certain things say what it says. So anyway, Black Jews. It is only necessary to look at the countenance of the Black Jews to be satisfied that their ancestors must have arrived in India many ages before the white Jews. Their Hindu complexion and their very imperfect resemblance to the European Jews, so notice it says the European Jews, indicate that they have been detached from the parent stock in Judea many ages before the Jews in the West, and that there have been intermarriages with families not Israelitish. I had heard that those tribes which had passed in Indias have assimilated so much that the customs and habits of the countries in which they live that they may be sometimes seen by a traveler without being recognized as Jews. In the interior towns of Malabar, I was not always able to distinguish between the Jew from the Hindu. I hence perceived how easy it may be to mistake the tribes of Jewish descent among the Afghans or and other nations in the southern parts of Hindustan. The white Jews look upon the black Jews as an inferior race and as not of a pure caste, which plainly demonstrates that they do not spring from a common stock in Israel. I mean, in India. Let me just scroll down here. I think there's one or two interesting lines out of this. All right, yeah, we'll leave that one be for now. So the main part there is that there's some discussion about the black Jews. Of course, there's some discourse between the black Jews and the white Jews, but the black Jews are considered like the ancient Jews. They have been there longer, and that's kind of called out in the text here as well. Okay, all right. So that's that. So I did want to just kind of pull out those three references that kind of speaks to the color of the Jews. And for our next reference, we're going to move into or get into the Inquisition. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slide. We're going to jump to slide 3. And so as far as the Inquisition, if you're familiar with the transatlantic slave trade, one of the things I like to make sure that people are aware of is that the part that the Pope at the time had played in slavery. So for this, I'm just going to zoom in here and just read a quick reference. This is from a book called Historical Survey of the Island of St. Domingo. And this comes from off of page 220. And it reads, "A curious circumstance was, however, omitted. When the Portuguese first began the traffic in Negroes, application was made to the Pope to sanctify the trade by a bull, which His Holiness issued accordingly. In consequence of this permission and authority, a very considerable slave market was started at Lisbon, insomuch about the year 1539, from 10 to 12,000 Negroes were sold there annually." So basically, the papal bull that the Pope signed kicked off slavery in that region, or kicked off the transatlantic slave trade. And so what I want to do is just go over to the third slide here. Let's see, and we'll read just a quick blurb about the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal, just to give you an idea of what was happening in Spain at the time. So let's read this. This comes from you can see the book there. It's by Frederick David Mocata. It's the book, The Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition, page 57. And I'm going to read it. The first paragraph here. It says, "Unfortunately, at the time of the expulsion, the plague was raging in Castile." So in Portugal, and just a quick note here. So what's happening is that the Jews in Portugal were told to get out. It said that you guys got to leave. And so throughout Europe, there were a bunch of what we refer to as expulsion edicts, declarations to, for the Jews, these black Jews to get out. So this is kind of where this reference picks up. But I'm reading this reference to set up the next one. So let's go ahead and read this one. It says, "Unfortunately, at the time of the expulsion, the plague was raging in Castile, and the fugitives brought with them the disease, propagating it wherever they went. And not unnaturally causing their advent to be viewed with loathing and horror. Break here. All right, so what's happening is that the Jews, the plague was raging in Castile. So, the name of the plague associated with the Jews is called what? The Black Death. Again, and people didn't want the Jews around because they were making the plague was spreading, through the Jews, and that's foretold in the Bible that that those plagues would cleave to the Jews and follow the Jews. So as we read here, it says, this circumstance induced King John, excuse me, induced King John. Take a sip of my tea here. All right. This circumstance induced King John to hasten their departure from Portugal, for which purpose ships were duly provided. So the king said, get out, and I'll provide you some ships to get out. But then some shady stuff went down with the ships too, but it's not covered in this one. And keep reading. It says, this circumstance induced King John to hasten their departure from Portugal, for which purpose ships were duly provided, according to the agreement. But such was the temper of the captains and the sailors that they subjected the Jews to the hardest possible conditions. They plundered them of their goods and valuables, even to their very clothes, taking the shirts off their back, basically. And landed them naked and bare of everything on barren points of the African coast. So they took up everything they had, everything they owned, and left them stranded on the African coast. And then it says, leaving them to die of starvation or to be sold into slavery to the Moors. Nor was this all. The king, and that's King John, wrested from their parents all the children between the ages of 3 and 10. And just to pause here, it says it's 10 in this reference. In other references, you'll see that the king at that time changed it. He increased it to I believe it was like 3 and 16. We'll actually read it here shortly, if I remember. And then later he increased it to include the Jewish children or young adults in the 20s. So it was basically all the young folks. All right, so back to the reference. It says, nor was this all. The king wrested from their parents all the children between the ages of 3 and 10 of those Jewish immigrants who from poverty or otherwise had omitted to pay the capitation tax on entry. So when the Jews came into Portugal, they charged them a tax. Think of it as a toll booth. So as the Jews were coming in, they put that toll booth down. They said, you guys got to pay me. And if you can't pay me, I'm taking your kids. And it says, and so the ones that they couldn't pay the capitation tax, they had their children taken away from them. It says, or the ones that were forced to remain in Portugal, because when King John gave that declaration for the Jews to get out, he said set a date that if they didn't get out by that time, that they would be arrested or enslaved. And let's see what happened to them. So the ones that had omitted to pay the capitation tax on entering, or those who were forced to remain in Portugal, and they had them transported, they had them sent to the newly discovered islands of St. Thomas. So he took the Jews to St. Thomas, which then swarmed with alligators and other beasts of prey, to be brought up as Christians. And so just keep in mind that with this reference, so this reference tells us that the children of the Jews and the Jews, we know that there were women and men in there as well, but for the most part, they were the children that were taken from the Jews in Portugal and Spain, and that they were sent, according to this particular reference, they were sent to St. Thomas. But we have some other references that'll show you exactly where they were sent in addition to St. Thomas, which is on the west coast of Africa. All right, so we're going to exit out of this presentation. So now we've learned that during the time of the Inquisition, and this was just one of the expulsion edicts, that the Jews were sent to the west coast of Africa, in particular St. Thomas Island. All right, so for our next reference, now this is what I call a high value reference, and the reason why I call it that is because of the time period that this reference comes from and the person who it comes from. So this particular reference comes from a author called John Ogilvy, and I'm going to see if I can get to the title screen so you can see the author in the title. About John Ogilvy, he was the cosmographer and printer to the king, and I believe it was King Charles II. So John Ogilvy would be a person of interest. We would want to know what John Ogilvy would have to say, because he would be someone that would have the ear of the king at the time. And we know that that London, that they played a major role in the transatlantic slave trade. So for this one, for this reference, I believe the reference for this guy is way back. There's actually some really good material in here, but we're going to go to one that's all the way in the back of the book. So if you can, well, let me zoom in just so that you can see the title, if you can't already see it. So let me do that first. And my screen's still rendering. All right. So this is the book that we're going to take a look at. This too is one of those rare books that is hard to get a hold of. There used to be digital copies out there floating on archive.org, but they pulled those copies. So you have to kind of poke around to see if you can get it. Yeah, I will, and I'll put some links out there for them. But let me zoom back out, and I'm going to go over to page. Let's see here. We're going to do page, I believe it's 575. And let's see if it renders. All right. Yep. So actually, page 574. I think that's the interesting paragraph. So on page 574, this is just kind of give you some background. This is talking about King John again. So this is about King John. This is about discussing Portugal and west coast of Africa, and the people that were there. So this interesting gives a really good description as to who's on the west coast of Africa and who put them there. I'll say that again. This reference is a good reference that shows us who's on the west coast of Africa and who put them there. So halfway down on the page, and it's one of those books, like if you can get your hands on a digital copy, feel free to read the whole thing for context. But these couple of paragraphs pretty much sum up the whole west coast of Africa. And it says, the Portuguese that dwelt on this island, that's St. Thomas, informed the Netherlanders, the Dutch, that few lived above 50 years there. Yet, notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry. So there was money to be had. So, the Netherlanders wanted to go anyway. So, but the Portuguese kind of warned us. They told them that, on this island, we don't live long. And basically, the Europeans didn't live long in Africa when they went there at the time, because of the because of the weather and the plagues and all that stuff. So let's read it again. It says, the Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlanders that few lived there above 50 years there. Yet, notwithstanding the great gain, tempted them to tarry. So there's money to be had. It says, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills. And we have a semicolon that says, it's going to explain it. It says that John III, King of Portugal, that we just read about, right, sent a colony thither above 200 years before. So 200 years before the writing of this book was written in 1670, I think. So 200 years before that book, King John, who was around in the 1400s, he sent a colony there, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed. So the first colony that he sent there, it killed him. It said, yet the place was not left desolate, so they did not all die. It said, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled Guinea. Now, if you have a map of Guinea, Guinea is the west coast of Africa. All right. So these people, so the king sent new inhabitants who first settled Guinea, and this is in the 1400s. Next, in Angola, if you're familiar with the continent of Africa, Angola is just below Nigeria. You got Congo, then you got Nigeria, so that whole area. And lastly, on the island of St. Thomas. So remember, we read about St. Thomas on our previous reference. If you don't remember, just feel free to back up the presentation. But I'm going to read it again without stopping here. All right. That John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom the unwholesome air destroyed. Yet the place was not left desolate. For he sent new inhabitants, who first settled Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas. So this tells us that the King John sent a colony to those three places, which was the west coast of Africa. And let's read what John Ogilvy has to say about it. So he says, let's see, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be better used to the air, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves. Let me repeat. So, King John is, the king of Portugal, and we read I think it was either 2 or 3 references back that, the king of Portugal petitioned the Pope for slavery, right? So the Pope issued that papal bull, authorized it, things kicked off. And you may be wondering, why would a Pope authorize the Negro slave trade? Well, it looks like we have our answer here. So if we read this again, it says, I'm just going to back up a little bit just so that we get the proper context. It says that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before. So back in the 1400s, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, West Africa. So that so they might be better used to the air, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion. Let me read that again. That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion. So now you know why the Pope at the time authorized the transatlantic slave trade. But let's keep reading. And caused their children to be baptized. And we read about the children in the previous reference. And caused their children to be baptized, from whom, coming thither to that place, west coast of Africa, in great numbers. You got to read this one slow. It says, coming thither in great numbers. Then it says, most of the present inhabitants were descended. Let me read that one again. It says, from whom, coming thither in great numbers, west coast of Africa, the Jews coming there in great numbers, who were, according to this, were sold as slaves. He said most of the present inhabitants there were descended. So now you can understand why this book wouldn't be out there on mainstream, right? Because this reference is pretty damaging. There's some other text in this book as well, but that's pretty much your transatlantic slave trade in a nutshell. But we're not done. Yeah, but wait, there's more. All right, so we're going to leave this reference and go over to our next reference because we want to get some more understanding about the transatlantic slave trade and these now reading this this reference, now we know that there were Jews on the west coast of Africa, and we also know who put them there, and we know who sold them as slaves, and we know that Portugal was one of the first countries to participate in the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, all right. So for this next next reference, this is also a reference from John Ogilvy, but this book is called Africa, being an accurate description of the regions. So I have it up on the screen. I'm going to zoom in just so that you can see the title. And this too is a digital copy. And I'm going to zoom back out so that I can navigate the pages. And I believe there's a couple of pages of interest in here, but the one that I want is 34. We got a graphic there. Let me just keep going. There it is. All right. So page 34. All right. So page 34. I'm just going to start at the top of page 34 and read down. And this book confirms who are on the west coast of Africa. Okay. All right. It reads, many Jews also are scattered over this region. Some natives, boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger. Now, you may be looking at the screen and wondering why I'm not pronouncing that Niger. That's because back in the day, it wasn't called Niger. That's a relatively modern pronunciation of it. It was actually called nigger. And that's where the word nigger, the derogatory term, comes from in the States, and that's because of the slaves that were gathered from the river Niger Delta. So this tells us who the niggers are, according to the people around during that time. So let's read. It says, let me start again. It says, many Jews also are scattered over this region. So there's not a whole lot of interpretation that we need around that. So we know a lot of Jews were scattered over this region. It says, some natives boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger. Others are Asian strangers who fled thither either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian, or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians. So basically, all the Jews fled from these different places and came to the west coast of Africa, is what John Ogilvy is writing here. Who, let me just remind you, he's the cosmographer and geographic printer of the king. So this isn't just some guy, right? This is a what we refer to as a high value reference. All right. Or else such as came out of Europe. And I need to read that again. Or else such as came out of Europe, whence they were banished. Because what a lot of people don't know is that the Jews were banished out of the European countries. So all this talk about the Jews going up and living happily in Europe, that's kind of a half truth. Maybe for the Edomite Jews they could pull that off, but for the real Jews, the real Jews were banished out of Europe. All right, so it or else such came out of Europe, whence they were banished, out of some parts of Italy in 1342, out of Spain in the year 1462, out of the Low Countries in 1350, out of France in 1403, out of England in 1422. These all differ in habit and are divided into several tribes, having no dominion, though both wealthy and numerous. So let me just stop here, just to kind of review what we've read so far. So this quote tells us that many Jews were on the west coast of Africa. They were in the Niger River region, and also that the Jews that were in the west coast of Africa were not only just the ones that were placed there by the Portuguese, but they were also the Jews that fled from all these various places, like from Jerusalem, from the Romans, from the Persians, from the Christians, and so forth. So this is kind of like a gathering place for the Jews, so to speak. All right. Let's keep reading. It says, these all differ in habit and are divided into several tribes, having no dominion, though both wealthy and numerous, but despised of all nations, and so abominated by the Turks that they are not admitted to be Mohammedans, unless first baptized, and then no otherwise made use of than to receive their customs and to gather their taxes. So basically, it's just saying that these Jews were despised out of all the nations. And here they were sitting on the west coast of Africa. And the Mohammedans, used them just to gather their taxes. But the European nations sent them into slavery, according to John Ogilvy. Okay. All right. So we got that. Let me see if there's another reference we want to share. All right, so we read this quote here. The Jews of Spain and Portugal. And this one, when we read this one, we read that the King of Portugal expelled the Jews from his country, took the children away, and this quote says that he took them to St. Thomas Island. John Ogilvy then goes on to say that they not only took the Jews to St. Thomas, but they took them to Guinea and Angola as well. And this next quote comes from, let's see, you can see the book. There's Portuguese exploration to the west and the formation of Brazil. But this is another high value reference. So this reference comes from, and I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Garcia de Resende. And this guy is the official chronicler of King John. All right, so he's the chronicler of the king. So let's see if Garcia de Resende says anything different than what John Ogilvy, who's the cosmographer of the king. So it's going to read a little down from the top here. It says, by the year 1470, the Portuguese had found the equatorial islands of St. Thomas in the Guinean coast, off the African coast. The climate proved to be extremely unwholesome for Europeans, and settlement was slow. So basically, he's affirming what we read in some of our other references, which just said that the Europeans didn't live long when they went to the west coast of Africa. It goes on to say the official chronicler of King John, that's John right there, Garcia de Resende, reports on one of the methods to populate this island that also throws some light on the tragic form of Jewish participation in the Portuguese Atlantic Empire. It says the king had allowed Jewish refugees from Spain from where they had been expelled. The king, let me read that again. It says the king had allowed Jewish refugees from Spain from where they had been expelled to remain in Portugal only in return for payment of an enormous ransom. We read that in a different reference as well. It says in 1493, those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force, and deported to St. Thomas in order to be raised as Christians and to help populate the island that the king had just leased. And I'm just going to skip to the last sentence here, and it says, nothing is known of their further fate, although later chroniclers attribute the thriving sugar production on the island to the talents of these deported children and their offspring. So this reference tells us that the Portuguese sent the children, or took the children away from the Jews, baptized them by force, and put them into slavery. Basically, is what it's saying. All right, and this is just another just a side note here, just to kind of show you that a description of the Portuguese community. So the very last sentence on this page, I don't have a page number. I'll try to get you that page. I'll get you that page number, and it says, the documents also describe the evolution of the black Portuguese communities in Guinea and the islands, as well as the slave trade and the way it was organized, understood, and justified. So I just wanted to call this out to show you that the communities were black communities. All right. Hopefully you can see the name of this book. This is another digital book. You can see it on the left. As you can see, it's a free book on Google Books. And this quote comes from page 218. I'll give you a chance to take a look at that. Now, this particular reference speaks to those that were convicted by the Inquisition. This is referring to the west coast of Africa. If you start at the top of the page, kind of cut off some of that, but if you start at the top of the page, you'll see it's referring to the west coast of Africa. And there's a footnote at the bottom of the page to show you the countries that it's referring to on the west coast of Africa. But I'll read here the last couple of sentences at the bottom. It says, moreover, in Spain, they but seldom put their malefactors, the word malefactors means criminals. So I'll read that and just kind of substitute malefactors. It says, moreover, in Spain, they but seldom put their criminals to death, as we do in France. They send them all to these desert countries to traffic there. So the word traffic means slavery. So they send them all to these desert countries. What desert countries? Well, you can see the countries listed in the footnote at the bottom. This is basically the Congo, Angola, basically the west coast of Africa. So what this reference tells us is that Spain was sending their criminals, their so-called criminals, their Jews, to the west coast of Africa as for slaves. All right. And interesting tidbit about the Inquisition. So the actual book of the Inquisition that contained like the bylaws and stuff like that. That book had many nicknames, but one of the nicknames was called the Libro Negro. That's the book of the Inquisition. It was sometimes called the Libro Negro, or you can see the Libro Necro, the book of the dead. But the Libro Negro is a name for uh, the official book of the Inquisition. Within that book, it showed the crimes and how to conduct the trials and also the sentences. And this is just one of those books that are out there on Amazon, just to show you that it's called the El Libro Negro de la Inquisición, the Black Book of the Inquisition. And this is just another cross reference from Saint John of the Cross. It just reads, "Thus the Libro Negro, in which were recorded the acts of the chapters and definitiaries, vanished except for a few extracts." So just saying that the Libro Negro disappeared after a while. It's kind of hard to find. All right, I'm going to skip that one, that reference. Okay, all right. So I'm going to back
Region.
up. So in the Libro Negro, and actually let me exit out of here and go to a web browser because I think I have a better view of this. Hopefully you can see this in your screen. But the name of this book is A Narrative of the Persecution of Hippolito Joseph de Costa, Volume 2. And within this book, it defines some of the sentences that were given out as part of the Inquisition. Like, so basically what the Inquisition was, you had I call them like the secret police, for the Jews that didn't want to embrace the Roman version of Christianity. They would be arrested, and then by the Inquisition officers, and they would be tortured, and they would try to wrestle a confession from them, and then either burn them at the stake, or they would ship them off somewhere. So the purpose of this reference is to tell us where those that were convicted by the Inquisition. We want to use this reference to tell us where the convicted Jews were sent. So what I just did a quick search here, and it's just to show you the places. So we're just going to run through them really quick, but it says, and she shall be, and this is just kind of reading off the punishments, and she shall be sent to the galleys, and if a female, she shall be exiled to the island of Principe, West Africa, St. Thomas, West Africa, or Angola. And this one is, we kind of catch this one mid-sentence here, but it says, shall be condemned to the same punishment of whipping, and shall be exiled for the same period to the kingdom of Angola or some parts of Brazil. I think this one's mid-sentence too. Let's see, it says, and shall be sent to the galleys or exiled to St. Thomas or Angola. And this one's another one, exiled to the island of Principe, St. Thomas, or Angola, West Africa. Shall be exiled for as many years to Brazil or Angola, and shall be exiled to St. Thomas, Angola, or Brazil. And there's a few more here, and it's pretty much the same thing. You'll see St. Thomas, Angola, or Brazil for a lot of these. So basically, what the Inquisition was doing was that it was sending those Jews that were convicted. It was sending them to the west coast of Africa. So I think we'll stop there for now, and we'll pick this up in another video. But this is we'll end this video. We'll call it part 1, and this is Black History, the Inquisition. Black History, the Inquisition, and hopefully with some of these references, you can begin to see how the Inquisition had a direct impact, mostly, on the so-called African American, which are the true Hebrews, or the true children of Judah, from the house of Judah. So thank you for watching. There will be another video to come. I do have another video coming up on the color of the Jews to kind of put that whole conversation to bed as far as what the Jews look like. We'll kind of ramp up the references on that one, just so that we can kind of squash all that, all the back and forth as far as the color of the Jews. I just want to make sure we leave no question by the time that video ends. So thank you again for watching, and feel free to continue your research, and by all means make these references your own. And with that said, shalom. It's your brother Benaiah Ben Israel, and welcome to Hebrew Israelite Research Episode 1. That's Hebrew Israelite Research Episode 1. Now, before we get started, I do want to show you a few things on our website. So on your screen, you should see a web browser. And for this, I'm going to take you over to our brand new website. Now, for those that are interested in reviewing references, what we'll do is, going forward, whenever we make a video, we're going to place all of those references on the website. So if you want to review the references after the video comes out, you will be able to go to the new website to view the references. All right, so on your screen, you'll see in the address bar, and if you want to follow along, that's fine. Just open up a web browser and type in https://BenaiahForIsrael.org. That's https://BenaiahForIsrael.org. So I'm going to go ahead and click go on my browser, and just to show you the new website. So on the website, we're still adding content. From time to time, just check back here for new content to see what we have. On our website, just to show you around a bit here, on the left-hand side, you'll see we have a link for YouTube videos. Here on this page, you'll be able to review or view the videos that we've published, and should have our most recent videos here. And then in the middle of the screen, this will probably be the link that people use most. This is the link that we will use to review the video references. And then last but not least, on the right-hand side, we do have a link for donations for those wishing to donate towards the awakening. And I do want to thank you in advance for those that do donate. All right. So back over to our video references. So let's click on our video reference link to see what's there. All right. So this is our video reference page, and it should bring up the most recent video references, or the references for the most recent video. So our most recent video is Hebrew Israelite Research, episode 1, and these are the references associated with the video. All right, on here you'll see the publication date here, and if you scroll down, you'll also see the video references. And I do want to point out that on either side, like on the right side or the left-hand side, we do have buttons to help you to navigate the references. So right now we have references showing 1 through 4, but if I click on the button, it'll show the next group of references. All right, so I'm going to bring it back to references 1 through 4 so that we can get started. And then last but not least, at the very bottom of the video, you'll see a section called video notes. These are just summary notes that are associated with the video. These are topics that were covered during the video. Feel free to come through and look through here just to get a quick summary of what the video will cover. All right. All right. Again, keep in mind it's a work in progress. We will add content to it over time. However, this is what we have so far. Okay, let's get started. For episode 1, we want to review the Hidden Hebrews 3 video references. We're not going to review all the references, but just a few references that were missed or deserve additional explanation. Within the Hidden Hebrews 3 video, you should notice that we reviewed a painting within this video. So I'm going to right click on the link and navigate to the video. Oh, a quick note about the link here. Let me go back over to our page. Right now, I don't have the actual link work. You may have to copy paste it into your web browser to navigate. But eventually, I will change this so that all you have to do is click on it, and it'll take you to the link instead of you having to copy paste that. So that is something that we're working on. All right. So, but if you go to reference 1 and you follow the link for reference 1, you'll notice that it'll take you to our painting. So this is the painting that was reviewed within the video, and I'm going to zoom in on this painting just so that we can review a few things in this painting. Hidden Hebrews 3, we reviewed how the children of the Jews that were in Portugal were taken from their parents. And this painting is a painting from the 1500s during the time of the Inquisition. And this was shortly after the edict was given that the Jews be taken from their parents. And on the bottom left-hand side, we showed this in the video, a young man being taken. And behind the young man, you'll see a young woman. Behind her, you'll see a person with a club. So I pointed that out just to show that there is correlation between this painting and our references, right? Let me show you what I mean. So if we go to reference number 2, and I'm going to follow the link for this reference. I'm just going to copy, double left click, and then right click, and it says go to the link. So I'm going to follow this link here on page 129. Here we are. We're on page 129, and I'm going to zoom in so that you can see it. All right, so I'm going to go all the way to the top. Let me start at the third line where it says, "The Moors immediately passed over into Africa. And as the Jews were preparing to depart, the king commanded that all their children who were not above 14 years old should be taken from their parents and educated in the Christian religion. It was a most affecting thing to see children snatched from the embraces of their mothers and fathers, embracing their children," listen, it says, "violently torn from them and even beat with clubs." So I wanted to point out that in this reference, we have correlation between the Jews being beat with clubs and what we see in this painting. So in this painting, we see this young man being taken, and we also see a couple of people back, a person holding a club. So there's definite correlation between the references. All right. Okay. also like to review in these videos the description of the Jews. So we're going to go to reference number 3, and we're going to follow that. Let's go to reference number 3, and let's see. From reference number 3, we want to go to page 141. So 141. So here we are. We are on page 141. And I'm going to zoom in here just so that you can see it on your screen and make it easier for reading it here. So I'm going to move it all the way up to the top of the screen. So if you look at the top of the screen where it reads, King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471, and to other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And then it reads, from these banished Jews, it says, the black Portuguese, as they are called. So a takeaway here is that the Portuguese Jews were called black Portuguese. And also note that the Portuguese and the Spanish word for black back in the 14 to 1500s was or is Negroes. Okay, so these Portuguese were called black Portuguese or Negro Portuguese. Okay, this reference gives a brief description of the Jews. So we know that they're called black or Negro Portuguese. Let's look at an additional reference which describes the color of the Jews. This is reference number 4. And as you see, I'm going to scroll up to the top so you can see the page number. So you see it 139. At the top of the screen, it says, "'Tis also a vulgar error that the Jews are all black." So he's saying that it's error to think that the Jews are all black. And it says, "For this is only true of the Portuguese Jews." So basically he's saying that the Portuguese Jews are all black. Do you get that, Israel? He says that this is only true of the Portuguese Jews. What's only true of the Portuguese Jews? That they are all black. You got it? All right. That's another reference that gives us a description of the Jews. Our references are lining up. Reference 3 lines up with reference 4. And what you'll see is that this also lines up with references 1 and 2 as well. Okay. So let's go over to reference 5. And for reference 5, this is another reference that's going to help us identify the Jews on our painting. When we look at our painting, we want to be able to identify the Jews when we see it. All right? Okay, this reference is coming from the introductory section XIX, and this is on the right-hand side of your screen. All right? And I'm going to start at the top, and it says, "He was of a middle size. He had good features in his face." It says, "the skin somewhat black." All right? The skin somewhat black. Black curly hair, long eyebrows, and of the same color, so that one might easily know by his looks that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. All right? So this reference tells us that just by his looks, they could tell that he was descended from Portuguese Jews. This reference is lining up with the previous references in the previous descriptions of the Jews. I do want to take time to point out that this is why I prefer using older references. Like if you use references that date back to the 1800s and older, this is the description that you will find in these books. But it's when you use newer references, like references from the 1900s and newer, you will find a totally different description of the Jews in those books. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of what the Jews look like, let's go back over to our painting. All right, so now that we know that the Jews were black, and that we know that the children were taken from the parents, and that they were taken from their parents using clubs, we can now look at this painting and identify a few things. We already talked about the child being taken off to the left, and notice that he's black, right? So this matches the description of the Jews. And we also see the person behind him with clubs. This also matches up with what we read in our references. Also during the Inquisition and also in Hidden Hebrews 3, we covered auto de fe. So auto de fe was the burning of the Jews by the Christian church. And one thing to keep in mind about auto da fés is that they were usually held in one of two places. Auto da fés were held on Sunday, and they were usually either held at the church or they were held at the city square. Now, this painting just so happens to be a painting of the city square in Lisbon. And when we look in the middle of this painting, so let me zoom out just so that you can see that this is in the middle here, or somewhat in the middle. And I'm going to zoom back in to this to the gentleman in the middle. And I don't know if you can see it on your screen, depending on the resolution on your monitor, but this gentleman is being burned. So this is an auto da fé. So at the bottom, you'll see that there are flames consuming him. And then also at the top, and this is something that I didn't cover in previous videos, but at the top, whenever someone would get burned, sometimes the church would impose some grace and they would choke them before they were burned instead of burning them alive. And to do that, the church would sometimes put a device on the head and neck to choke the victim before burning them. So when we look at this painting, knowing that, we also see that this gentleman has a device on his head and neck. So this too also matches up with what we've read in our references. This is an auto da fé, and notice that this gentleman too is black. The last thing I want to point out is that also during the 1500s, during the time of the Inquisition, some Jews accepted Christianity. Right? They accepted Christianity, or they was forced to accept Christianity. When we look around on our painting, we also see the gentleman with a red cross on his sleeve. The Jews that were converted over to Christianity were called new Christians. What we see on our screen is we find a gentleman that matches the description of a new Christian. During the time of this painting in the 1500s, Jews were accepting Christianity, and you see what appears to be a new Christian in the bottom right. And also during the time of this painting were auto da fés, and you see the gentleman in the middle. This appears to be an auto da fé. And then last but not least, the children were taken from their parents with clubs, and you can see that on the bottom left. All right, so hopefully you learned a lot about that reference. Another topic I wanted to review from the Hidden Hebrews 3 video. This actually has to do with the Jews being placed on the west coast of Africa and the slave coast being named after their children. So first things first, let's review a reference to show that the Jews were placed on the west coast of Africa in great numbers. So for this, let's go to page 574. And this is one we've shared in a couple of different videos, so you may be familiar with it. For those that are new to the channel, I do want to review it just for their sake. It says that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither, and this is talking about the west coast of Africa, above 200 years before, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed. This book was written in the 1600s, so around 200 years before this book was the 1400s. So this matches up with what we've read so far, where we know that John II sent the Jews to the west coast of Africa in the 1400s. And let's keep reading. It says, yet the place was not left desolate, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be the better used to the air, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves. One quick note, this reference is telling us that the Jews that were sent to the west coast of Africa were sold as slaves. And then it goes on to tell us why. It says that refused to embrace the Roman religion and caused their children to be baptized. All right, so again, this book matches up with what we read so far. Children being taken from their parents, sent to the west coast of Africa to be brought up as Christians and slaves. And it says, from whom coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. All right, so this reference tells us the children were placed on the west coast of Africa in great numbers. And actually, to be more precise, it says the Jews were placed on the west coast of Africa in great numbers. In our previous videos, we also showed that the Jews that were placed on the west coast of Africa by the Portuguese slave traders. And when the Portuguese slavers brought the Jews to the west coast of Africa, they named the slave coast after the children. They called the slave coast the Kingdom of Judah. I do want to address this because I've seen this explanation out on the internet from time to time, and it has to do with the name of the slave coast. One explanation that's floating out there was that the Portuguese actually named the slave coast in Portuguese help. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me go over to Google Translate. We're going to translate from Portuguese to English. So we're going to translate Judah to English. And you'll see that from Judah to English, it says help, right? So this is why some people would say, well, the Portuguese, when they called the kingdom of Judah, Judah, they were just calling it help because that's where their help was coming from, their slave helpers. That's a half truth in that Judah does mean help. However, let me also show you what Judah also means. So for this, I'm going to go from English to Portuguese. So I'm going to go from English to Portuguese. And we're going to translate Judah to Portuguese. So you'll see from Judah to Portuguese, you'll see it means Judah. It's also translated Judah. Okay? Judah. So Judah means help, and Judah also means Judah. You got it? So Judah means help, and Judah also means Judah. The only difference is the accent on the A at the back. You got it? Okay. So hopefully that helps you out. If you're doing research and you come across this explanation of the slave coast being referred to as Judah, and they're saying that it means help, feel free to let them know that Judah also means Judah. And what you can do is that you can also take them to this reference. Let me show you a good reference to help people get some clarification on Judah. All right, so on page 267, let's go down to the section of Dahomey. Let's read. It says, Dahomey, east of Great Popo, begins the Dahomey territory, guarded by the important town of Glewa, known to Europeans by the various names. I'm skipping down. It says, the old writers called it Judah. You see? And it says, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews. So not only did they call it Judah, but they said that the inhabitants were Jews. And then it says, while the neighboring river Alala, whose real name is Ephra, became the Euphrates. And it says, during the flourishing days of the slave trade, from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from Judah, as the Portuguese called this place. Let's see, were they calling it help or were they calling it Judah? According to this reference, it was called Judah. And who lived in Judah? Jews. You got it? So the old writers called it Judah. Jews lived in Judah. And the Portuguese called it Judah, which also means Judah. All right. So hopefully that helps you in your research, and it also helps you if you run into those that would say that the slave coast was called Judah, which means help. Like I said, feel free to let them know that Judah also means Judah. All right. And for our last reference, this was a reference that I ended up pulling at the last minute off of the Hidden Hebrews 3 video. This reference describes the end of the Inquisition, right? It shows us how the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, actually ended, and it ended by the French. And the importance of this reference is to show us where the torture chambers of the Inquisition were located. So as you listen to this reference, as we read this reference, pay close attention to where the torture chambers of the Inquisition were located. The Inquisition revealed, page 304. It had been decreed by Napoleon that the Inquisition and the monasteries should be suppressed. Months, however, had passed away without the decree being executed. I went that night directly to Marshal Soult, told him what had taken place, and reminded him of the emperor's decree. He said I might go the next morning and destroy the Inquisition, giving me charge at the same time to take care of the pictures, library, and other things of value. I replied that my regiment was not sufficient of such a service, but if he would give me the 117th of the line and another regiment which I named, I would undertake the work. The colonel of the 117th, Colonel Delisle, was an intimate friend of mine and is now the pastor of an evangelical church in France. Marshal Soult gave me the troops required. That night the expedition was arranged, and the next morning we proceeded at break of day to the Inquisition, which was about 5 miles distant from the city. A wall of great strength surrounded the buildings. I went forward with a company of soldiers, addressing one of the sentinels on the wall, summoned those within to surrender and to open the gates to the imperial army. The man withdrew, and after conversation, apparently with someone within, he reappeared, presented his musket, and shot one of my men. This was a signal of attack. And returning to my troops, who had halted at a distance out of sight, I ordered them to advance and to open upon those who had appeared on the walls. It was soon obvious that it was an unequal warfare. The garrison was numerous, and on the walls there was a strong breastwork, from behind which they kept up a destructive fire upon our men on the open plain. We had no cannon. Our scaling ladders were insufficient, the walls being higher than we expected. The gates resisted all attempts at forcing them. Wishing to get through the work as quietly and as quickly as possible, I directed some trees to be cut down and trimmed to be used as battering rams, selecting a place where the ground sloped a little towards the wall, and so gave advantage to my men to cover with their fire those engaged in the assault. 2 of these battering rams were brought to bear upon the walls. Presently, the walls began to tremble, and a breach was made, and the imperial troops rushed into the Inquisition. Here, we met with a scene for which nothing but Jewistical effrontery is equal. The Inquisitor General, followed by the fathers in their robes, all presented themselves as we were making our way into the interior of the place, with their arms crossed on their breasts, their fingers resting on their shoulders, as though they had been deaf to all the noise of the attack and the defense, and had just learned what was going on. They addressed themselves in the language of rebuke to their own soldiers, saying, "Why do you fight our friends, the French?" Their intention, no doubt, was to make us think that the defense was wholly unauthorized by them, hoping if they could make us believe that they were friendly, they should have a better opportunity of escaping. Their shallow artifice did not succeed. I ordered them to be placed under guard, and all the soldiers of the Inquisition who had not escaped in the confusion to be secured as prisoners. We then proceeded to explore the rooms of the stately edifice. We passed through hall after hall, richly furnished. We found splendid paintings of a rich and extensive library. Everywhere beauty, splendor, and order, such as I had never seen in any place. The architecture and the furniture, the ornaments, were such as pleased the eye and gratified the taste. But where were the gloomy cells and horrid instruments of torture, which one had been taught to expect to find in the Inquisition? We looked for them in vain. The Holy Father seemed surprised at our expecting to find such things, assured us that they had been belied, and that the Holy Catholic Church in this, as in other things, was grossly misrepresented. Although I saw through the cunning villainy of the fathers in those remarks, and knew how the Romish Church always affects to deny its crimes and cruelties when it carries them into execution, I was ready to believe, after our careful search, that this Inquisition was different from others of which I had heard. My friend Delisle was not, however, so easily convinced. "Colonel," he said to me, "you are commander this day, and as you say, it must be. But if you would be advised by me, let us have another search. I do not believe we have seen everything yet." We accordingly again began to explore, especially in the parts underground, by marking well what portion of the buildings we were beneath. We found that we had been under every part except the great chapel of the Inquisition and the buildings adjoining. The floor of this chapel was formed of vast slabs of rich marble. The floors of the other parts of the Inquisition were either marble or of highly polished wood. We could find no entrance to vaults or other indication of anything being below the chapel. Being now ready to give up the search, a thought struck Colonel Delisle, who was still sanguine of discovery. "Let us get water," he said, "and pour it over this floor and see if there's any place where it passes through more freely than the others." Water was immediately brought, and a careful examination made of every seam, none slabs being cemented, to see if the water passed through. Presently, one of the soldiers cried out that he had found it. "Here!" By the side of one of the marble slabs, the water was passing through fast, as though there were an opening beneath. All hands were now set at work for further discovery. The officers with their swords and the men with their bayonets were trying to clear out the seam and to raise the slab. Others began to strike the slab with all their might with the butt of their muskets in order to break it. The fathers, who had been looking on with the greatest dismay, now broke out in a loud remonstrance against our desecration of their holy and beautiful house. As they were thus engaged, one of the soldiers, who was busy with the butt of his musket, struck a part of the marble under which was a spring, and the slab partly flew up. Then the faces of the inquisitors grew pale, and they trembled, as Belshazzar when the handwriting appeared on the wall. The marble slab being raised, the top of a staircase appeared. I stepped to the altar and took one of the long candles, which was burning, some of my men doing the same, that we might see to explore what was below. One of the inquisitors here came up to me and, laying his hand gently on my arm, said with a demure in a holy book, "My son, you must not take those lights with your bloody hands. Those are holy." "Well," I said, pushing him back, "I will take a holy thing to shed light on iniquity or lawlessness. I will bear the responsibility." We proceeded down the staircase. On reaching the floor, the first room we entered was a large square hall, on one side of which was a raised platform with seats, the center one being raised considerably, being the throne of the Inquisitor General. In the center of the hall was a large block with a chain fastened to it, where the caused were chained during their examination. On leaving the Hall of Judgment, we proceeded along a passage with numerous doors. These were the cells of solitary imprisonment, from which the miserable victims were never brought out, except it were for torture. Within some of these cells, we heard sounds as we advanced. On opening the doors, we witnessed such sights as I wish never to see again, the details of which are too horrible to relate. In some cells we found bodies, apparently but a short time dead. Others were in various states of decay. We saw some of which little but the bones remained, still fixed by chains to the floor of the dungeon. To prevent this corruption being offensive to the occupants of the Inquisition, there were flues extending along the roofs of the cells and carrying the odor off to the open air. Among the living prisoners, we found aged men and women of 80 years and 10, youths and girls of 14 or 15, and others in the prime of life. Some had been there for many years and had lost count of the time since they entered. The soldiers went to work to release them from their chains and took their knapsacks, their overcoats, and other clothing to cover their nakedness. They were eager to be taken to the light of day, But having heard of the danger of this, I caused food to be given to them, and then directed them gradually to be brought out to the light as they were able to bear it. We then proceeded to explore another room where there were instruments of torture. One of these was a machine on which the victim was stretched, and every joint of the body, beginning with the fingers, was racked until the sufferer swooned away or died. Another engine consisted of a box in which the head and necks were immovably confined by a screw. And over this box was a vessel from which, drop by drop, water fell every second upon the head. This perpetual drop falling on the same spot caused most excruciating agony, ending ere long in raving madness. Another infernal machine lay along horizontally, to which the sufferer was bound, and then was placed between two beams on which scores of knives were fixed, so that by turning the machine with a crank, the flesh was torn from the limbs in small pieces. A fourth machine surpassed the others in fiendish ingenuity. Its exterior was a beautiful woman, richly dressed, with arms extending to embrace the victim. Around her feet, a semicircle was drawn. Whoever stepped over this line touched a spring, which caused the diabolical machine to open, and 1,000 knives pierced them with deadly force. The sight of these machines of infernal cruelty kindled the fury of the soldiers, already enraged with the resistance they met with and the death of their comrades in assaulting the walls. They declared that they would put their prisoners to the torture. I could not stem their fury. They began with the Holy Fathers. They put one on the machine for racking the joints. Another was put under the dropping water, and terrible was the agony he seemed to suffer. The Inquisitor General was brought before the machine called the Virgin, and commanded to kiss it. "You have caused others to kiss it," said the soldiers. "Now you must do it." They pointed their muskets and pushed him over the fatal circle. The beautiful image instantly prepared for the embrace, clasped him with its arms, and he was cut to pieces. My heart sickened at this awful scene, and I saw no more. In the meantime, the report had reached Madrid that the prisoners of the Inquisition were open. Multitudes were hastening to the place. Fathers there were who found long-lost daughters. Mothers their sons. Wives were restored to their husbands. Sisters and brothers met once more. Some were friendless and unrecognized. The scene of mingled joy, surprise, and anguish no tongue could describe. While this was going on, said the colonel, I gave orders for the library and paintings and furniture to be carefully removed and sent to the city for a large quantity of gunpowder. Placing this in the vaults and subterranean places of the buildings, and a slow match being set, we all withdrew to a distance and waited the result in silence. Presently, loud cheers rent the air. The walls and the turrets of the massive structure rose majestically towards the heavens, impelled by a tremendous explosion, and fell back to the earth, a vast heap of ruin. The Inquisition was no more. Well, Israel, we've reached the end of episode 1. In episode 1, we reviewed a handful of references from the Hidden Hebrews 3 video. Now, be sure to stay tuned for the upcoming episodes. Yah willing, beginning with the next episode, we will begin to share some exciting references, some exciting, rarely seen references about the transatlantic slave trade, the Jews, and more. So stay tuned, be on the lookout for the next episode. Thank you for watching, and shalom.
am not sure.
That's a very good job.
Can I read that one?
No, this ain't for little black. Well, this is for God-fearing Christians like me. For God-fearing Christians like me.
Deuteronomy 28. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Most High thy power, to observe and do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Most High God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. But if thou wilt not hearken to the voice of the Most High, to observe and do all his commandments, then curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
All these lies and delusions, wake me up, show me a new dawn. Open your eyes, rise, children of the light. I am awakened, I am awakened.
Israelites seek out the ways of the heathen to make a covenant with Satan's government. Turn their face away from the Most High, evil desire. 2 Kings 17 said they passed their sons and daughters through the fire. They begin cutting divine spiritual ties, clinging to the heathen lies. Evil spirits bind, breaking souls, breaking spirits, ripping flesh, breaking minds. Running from the Most High wrath on the blood-stained path. 70 AD, Israelites fall. The Most High's chosen seed go into captivity. Hebrew Israelites watch nations rise, they watch nations fall. Four beasts, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. We pray for the fall of the fourth beast. Under the iron foot of Rome, we long to go home. A hopeless nation lies dead in the valley of the dry bones. Simulation of Shemites to Hamite clones. Israelites roam.
All these lies and delusions, wake me up, show me a new dawn. Open your eyes, rise, children of the light. I am awakened, I am awakened.
Israelites enslaved to build a wicked nation. No true identity, only tribulations. Fed scraps of swine, we eat the worst of the animal kind. Used, confused, they set us in high places to be abused. Control the tribe, control the tribe. Our leaders take bribes to continue the lies. Four beasts behind the scene in disguise, watching with the all-seeing eye. The heathen take flight into a new world order. Hebrews sleepwalking into a wicked system that's gonna fall. Awake, awake, reject Babylon. Hear the trumpet of awakening throughout the day and night. Awake, the Most High's people, the Israelites. The earth has swallowed the flood of deception. The harvest ripe for collection. His people are walking, standing like a mighty army. The Most High has summoned, the Hebrews are coming. Awake, come out of captivity. Awake, you who sleep, arise. Receive the Most High's laws and commandments. We are the Israelites.
In my mind, all these lies and delusions, wake me up, show me a new dawn. Open your eyes, rise, children of the light. I am awakened, I am awakened. Clear my mind and my soul. Gave me a new mind. Oh, made me whole. I'll rise up.
Quam.
I'll be the new light.
Quam.
I am awakened.
Quam.
I am awakened.
Quam. Yes, you are.
I am on my